Welcome, everybody, back for episode 2 of College Football Coast to Coast with your boy, Pigskin Pete, and my esteemed colleague. Everybody knows him. He's very famous in the community. The voice of college football, Mark Rogers TV. How you doing, Mark?
Pigskin Pete, I'm doing well. I'm still not up to your level, but I'm working on it. That's one of the big goals in life. Hit that.
So you're not amazing and fantastic, but you're good, though.
If I can get one of these weeks, hit the amazing or the fantastic.
Yes.
We're going to shoot for that. You know, you do it in stages.
Yeah.
And you look for the other one too.
Right, exactly. So we have a lot to go over. Not a lot of big games last week. I mean, some entertaining games. I was at least entertained. I don't know about how great the games were in the grand scheme of things, but entertaining. And of course, this week, the return of the almighty SEC. I couldn't be more excited about this. I know you are too.
How have we played college football? How have we actually been able to start a season, have 3 weeks of college football, and now the real college football season starts?
Yes, that is true. And then, of course, in another month or so, we'll have the full gamut here with the Big Ten joining back. We need to talk a little bit about that too, with the scheduling there. Before we get into the show here today, folks, I want to give the floor real quick to Mark Rogers TV because everybody knows his situation. He's not uploading stuff on YouTube right now. You can find him here, obviously, every single Monday at noon. You can find him, I believe, on Tuesdays with, what's that guy's name? Sorry.
Steve Deace, Michigan Podcast, over on his deal, Michigan Podcast.
I was just listening to your last episode before we came on air today.
I'm honored.
But besides those two places, you have an announcement to make as far as where people can see your content for the time being. So go ahead.
Yeah, so for right now, we're over on Patreon, and you can join us right there. I will leave the link in the comment section. Join us on Patreon, and we hope to be on YouTube back full throttle at some point, but I have absolutely no idea when that's going to happen, if that's going to happen, but we are leaning on the when it's going to happen. But again, because of circumstances beyond my control that a lot of people have read into, both correctly and incorrectly, I have not been able to post anything on YouTube, but you can join me on Patreon, and I will leave the link in the description section or it's actually in the description section of all my videos. I'm going to leave it here in the chat. So I would appreciate everybody jumping on over. All my predictions are there. We'll do live streams throughout the week. I'm not going to guarantee every day, but it's been almost every day. And then a number of video posts as well.
Great. So everybody do that. Everybody support our man Mark here. It's not the same in the college football community without Mark on YouTube. So make sure you go over there and check him out. And hopefully he can get this issue resolved promptly, if not sooner. Okay, so before we jump into a lot of what people want to talk about this week is obviously the SEC matchups. There's a couple of interesting games in the ACC as well. But let's do some recaps from last week and get some of my thoughts and, of course, Mark Rogers' thoughts on some of these games that we saw take place on Saturday. Oklahoma State is continuing to carry the baton for the Big 12 as the worst Power 5 conference this year. I mean, even worse than the Pac-12's not playing, and they're even worse than that. How is that possible, Mark? This was what did they win by? A touchdown?
They had to score 13 points in the fourth quarter to pull it out against Tulsa. They were down most of that game. So we're going to give them a little bit of a break, not a lot of break, because if you're a really good top-notch team, then you can lose your quarterback and you should have capable backup quarterbacks and you should be able to blow out Tulsa regardless. 23.5-point favorite. They lost Spencer Sanders. He only threw 2 passes early in the game, completed 2 for 2. He's a running threat. He's a big kid. From what I've seen of him both last year and this year, I don't think he's a great quarterback. I think he's a top 30 quarterback in the nation right now, but he's got the skill set. He's got the talent. He was recruited extremely high. I actually did an interview with him when he was in the recruiting process on my channel, that he's got the skill level and the talent to be a top-notch quarterback, but he's not that right now. But still, it was a huge loss. He got nicked up, had to leave the game. Don't know what his status is. They bring on the backup, who's kind of like a system player. Can't remember the kid's name. I think it's Bullock. system type player, but not a lot of talent, limited, can't run. He threw a pick. They yanked him. They get the third stringer in there who kind of ran around, did a lot of things, and made it happen. Found Tylan Wallace enough times, who's one of the best wide receivers in college football, to make some big plays, put together 13 points late to win that game 16-7. And so that was an ugly performance. But, man, if the Big 12 would have dropped that one.
Well, this is Overreaction Monday, and I'm definitely going to overreact to this. But aside from the final score and just the overall performance from Oklahoma State itself, we had Chuba Hubbard as a Heisman contender, and maybe in the top 3 or 4, depending on which person you're looking at in their opinion. He did not have a good performance, not even 100 yards rushing. I think it was just over 3 yards per carry on average, which is not good against a team like Tulsa. The explosive offense we're used to seeing from an Oklahoma State and pretty much every other team in the Big 12 just was not there. I don't know, it wouldn't surprise me if Oklahoma State came out next week and completely turned things around. But that first performance was just it was alarming, to say the least.
And now, Pigskin, the problem I have with the way this season formats is we don't have any games outside the conference to see if the Big 12 can really play. So now they're just going to play each other, and obviously everybody's going to win the game and lose the game. So everybody's going to be 500 when it all adds up in every conference, and we've got absolutely nothing but bad performances to go on with the Big 12's best team, the best team to have played and I'm going to call Tulsa a decent team. So I'm making a stretch there because for Texas, it's been UTEP, and for Oklahoma, it's been Missouri State. So anybody with a pulse that's been played that's supposed to be a contender is Oklahoma State playing Tulsa and scratching by with a win 16-7. So the Big 12 has nothing left to impress us with unless maybe that TCU SMU game gets made up, and I don't think it's going to be.
No, probably not. At this point, it's the Texas and Oklahoma show, and it's not either one of their faults that the rest of these teams look so terrible. And we'll learn more about both of those teams in the future, too. But, I mean, regardless of what happens, an undefeated Big 12 team, whether it's Texas or Oklahoma, is going to make the playoffs. I don't think it doesn't really matter how bad the other teams are. But it does hurt. I mean, listen, welcome Oklahoma to Clemson shoes. You are now dominating your conference and is really – well, I guess there is a close second, but not really. I mean, they've been dominating the conference, but everybody on their schedule now strength of schedule continues to get weaker and weaker as the weeks go on.
The question that was being asked me last night and the last few days is what happens if the Big 12 champion isn't impressive, if they're not dominant. Right. If Texas and Oklahoma split between the regular season and the championship game, and one of them's 8-2 and wins the conference, and Cincinnati or UCF might be an interesting wild card here. If they could sweep the American, which gets a lot of respect, and understandably so. Their record against Power 5 is pretty strong, and UCF's got the win against Georgia Tech. Now, I know I don't expect Georgia Tech to do anything, but let's just dream just a little bit. Let's say Georgia Tech's better than expected in the ACC, and UCF's going to have the best non-conference win on the board. That's sad to say about the non-conference scheduling this year because of the situation, but that's going to be the best game on the board. And maybe UCF at undefeated over a Big 12 champ with 2 losses. That's going to be a fascinating debate if it happens.
Yeah, UCF, I realized Georgia Tech's Georgia Tech, and we got a little bit enamored by Georgia Tech's win week 1 against a bad Florida State team. But still, UCF went into Georgia Tech and won decisively, 49-21. Now, the score really doesn't say about the entire story about the game. That game was actually pretty good for 3 quarters. UCF just poured it all over them in the 4th quarter. But nonetheless, 49-21 is a decisive win on the road against a Power 5 team. So you can't discount that. Notre Dame and USF, I don't think this was very surprising to most people. A brand new coach down there at South Florida, Jeff Scott, on the road. It was just, I mean, the game was over before it started. But Notre Dame did what great teams do. And I posted this on Twitter during the game. They took a lesser opponent and they manhandled them. And that's all you can really ask for.
So, yeah, how many times does a team that's supposed to be as good as Notre Dame play a South Florida, and it's a 31-13 game? and they look okay, but they kind of slop through it, like maybe Miami and UAB. So UAB, South Florida, I think we can draw some comparisons there.
Yes.
They're about the same type program and type team this year. And Miami was up like 17-14 in that game, and then had to pour it on late, whereas Notre Dame just came in from the first drive and did exactly what you just said. This is what I hold back on the term great, but really good teams that are top 5 to 10 teams in the nation do 52 zip, bam, it's over.
Oh, I'm not saying that Notre Dame's great. I'm just saying they're doing what great teams do.
Yep.
And they're handling their end of the bargain there. The race for the who's going to be second place to Clemson in the ACC is getting more and more interesting as the weeks go on. Obviously, Miami with a decisive victory over Louisville, 47-34. I'll be the first to admit I had Louisville winning this game. But as the weeks go on, I learn more and more about these teams. And what I learned is, based on the first game with Louisville against Western Kentucky, they won decisively in that game. But Western Kentucky goes out and loses to something called Liberty this week. Another game I lost in my picks.
I had bet on that game.
It was 14.5 when I got it. I thought it was going to be a blowout, and it was the other way around. Anyway, based on that, I thought that Louisville was a decent squad. Now, what I saw this weekend, and you got to give credit to Miami too. I'm not discounting what Miami's performance, and in particular, the quarterback there. He had a great game, and the defense did well. Louisville's offensive line, they are in a race with Florida State to see who has the worst offensive line in all of the country. I mean, you got to give credit to the Malik Cunningham. He kept them in that game for a while. Just because of his athleticism. And what's the name of that running back? Hawkins. I don't know.
Fabian Hawkins.
Yeah,
yep.
Talk about a gamer that guy is.
He's not a big guy either.
No. He's a really good player. Between Cunningham and Hawkins, and really Hawkins mainly, they kept him in that game for a while, but their luck ran out at the end of the game, and Miami opened it up on them. But Miami did impress me. I realized that we don't have a lot to go off of now. They beat UAB, and they beat a mediocre at best, what seems to be anyway, Louisville team outside of those two players that we just talked about. I still was impressed with Miami. Miami is going into, obviously, this week against Florida State. We'll talk about that later in the show. And then they get to play Clemson on October 10th, which, by the way, your boy Pigskin Pete here bought tickets to that game this weekend, so I will be there.
I saw that on Twitter.
Yes.
Nice.
Overpaid, but I'll be there.
You want to go to that one. And there's probably going to be about, I saw 18,000, something like that at Clemson.
Yeah, I think 18,000 is the capacity. Of course, they play the Citadel this weekend, and I don't think they sold that out the markup on all these games, if you're a team that's lucky enough to be allowing any fans at all, which Clemson is, you're going to be paying 3 to 4 times markup on the normal ticket price. So I just don't see people coming off of $150 to go watch them beat up on the Citadel, unless you just have that expendable income. So I think the vast majority of the fans there this week were probably students.
Yeah, I would think so. So. And I saw Trevor Lawrence threw 9 passes, 1 hit the ground, and then he called it a day, as did Travis Etienne after rushing for about 75 or 80 yards. And then it's one of those games where I would say for most teams that they get to play all 105 or 85, or that's the scholarship or the roster. But Dabo does that almost every game anyway.
Well, they played 95 players this week, which it was not to be. That wasn't unexpected. And yes, for the past 2 years now, Clemson has played more players on average than any other Power 5 team.
So Miami, Louisville, this was definitely, so this tells us a lot about the college football season to date, Pete, is that that's the biggest game of the season. Wasn't the best game, but it's the biggest game so far that's been played. Mm-hmm. And, I feel like an idiot based on what we discussed last week, because I should have dumbed it down to this. And I did a show right after the game was complete, and you can imagine, and in the comments section, I basically took the clip of our discussion and analysis on the game last week, and I posted that, and people are all over us, as you can imagine, and that's part of the fun. We get the pick wrong, and people go on. But what I find funny is, I get termed and named the Miami hater, because you pick them to lose one game. You hate them. You're a hater. So I reminded people. I picked you guys to go 8-4 last year. You went 6-7. I picked you 9-3 the year before that. You went 7-6. I'm not exactly the hater. Yeah, I'm going to pick you to lose a game once in a while. But I even said this. It should have hit me when I said this, but Louisville had the near elite offense. But if you don't have an offensive line, we'll have to reevaluate that. We'll see when they play better teams. But anyway, from a skill position standpoint, speed, they've got a top 15 offense in the nation, and they did last year. And all those guys were coming back. So I kind of rested on that they had the chemistry, whereas Miami's got just as much speed and talent on offense, but they haven't played together. So I was resting on that. Satterfield's a really good coach. They're at home. But if I'm going to rate Louisville's offense like an 8 or an 8.5, and I'm saying this entering the game, I was thinking like 8.5, and Miami's maybe a 7. Again, they've got just as much talent, but we haven't seen it. And Louisville's defense is a 4.5 to be kind, and Miami's is more like an 8. I should have just put those together and said Miami's going to win this game. The impressive thing about Miami is any win would have been good. Louisville had a lot of cachet coming into the season. 8-5 coming off a bowl win. A lot of people like them coming into this season. So any win on the road against Louisville as a slight underdog would have been great. But man, Miami, after about the second or third possession, they were clearly the better team. They won by 13, and that was not indicative of how much they dominated that game.
No, it's not. And I'm guilty of this. I overvalued Louisville based on the fact that they went from 2 wins 2 years ago to 8 wins last year. I overvalued them, but outside of the quarterback and the running back position, and they got a couple of really good receivers too. But that offensive line, you can't have a good offense with no offensive line. Just ask Florida State about it.
And I said that again. Another thing I should have connected. So every so often, don't you make those picks where you're like, you're going to miss picks. You can't get them all right. Of course, you're going to miss, against the spread. Hopefully 43%, something in that range. You're still going to make money. So, but you feel okay about the game. It just turned on you. But sometimes you're like, you're only like 5-10 minutes into the game, and you're like, man, that was dumb. Why didn't I see this? Why didn't I see this coming? And that's my first one of the year right there. But 5-2 against the spread, I'll take it. So I'm 9-5 against the spread to start the season.
You did much better than me. That's why I'm very excited. Now I see Uncle Lou's in here. So of course we have the Lunch Money Show where we talk about the betting lines, excuse me, every Tuesday and Thursday at noon. So we'll be on tomorrow. And I went back and I looked, Mark, because I'm not doing well this year. I mean, we're only 2 weeks in as far as the betting goes. I'm below 500. I'm actually doing better on my NFL picks than I am on my college. Maybe I need to start an NFL channel. I don't know. Clearly, I don't know anything about it.
I've wanted to do that for a long time.
But what I noticed, because I keep a book of everything I've done, every bet I've made for the past few years while I was on YouTube. And so I went back last year because I had a great year last year. I was close to 60% at the end of the season. And what I noticed was more than 3/4 of the bets I made last year were on the SEC games. And I did most of my winning was with the SEC and Ohio State. That was I bet Ohio State every week and won because they covered, I think, 11 out of 12 games in the regular season. But anyway, so that's why I'm looking forward, aside from seeing the football product on the field, is from a betting standpoint, I'm looking forward to starting to bet on SEC. And to me, they're easier to bet on because, like we mentioned earlier in the show, the ACC has so much parity. I mean, there is no clear-cut second best team in the ACC. So it's Clemson, and then you have a big conglomerate of everybody else, and you have a couple teams at the bottom, but it's just a big hodgepodge, and you just don't know who's going to win week to week. And that even makes it harder to bet against the spread, which is already a disadvantage. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, well, I pretty much prioritize the games based on the quality of the teams and the games every week when I watch the game. So truth be known, I'm probably watching the SEC, then the Big Ten more than anyone. And then it's the ACC, and I probably discard the Big 12 to a large extent because it's a lot of Kansas State, Iowa State type games, which I'm going to watch that game if it's the only thing I've got to watch. But if it's up against like two good SEC games, a good Big Ten game. Of course, those games just get buried for me. I can only watch so much.
Yes.
Probably just know more about the SEC. So I'm curious. At just under 60% last year, how many games roughly did you predict over the course of the entire season?
So I'm actually going with the ones that I actually bet on, and I did an average of 4 to 5 a week. That's usually my thing there. So, but I did all 12 weeks plus the bowl season. So you work it out there. It was over 100 games that I actually bet, and then probably somewhere around 15 bowl games that I bet on.
See, I think I alluded to this last week, that when I'm in the betting game, which I'm not this year for whatever reason, I just checked my account. I didn't go in there, just didn't bother with it, but I have been for whatever 7, 8, 10 years. Is that I just play all the games I pick. I just figure, my system should win, so I got to play them all, regardless of my level of confidence. I'm going to play them all.
And on average, how many a week? 25 games, or?
Yeah, I'm playing 25 games. I picked like 288, so 171 and 127 against the spread. I was at 57.5% last year against the spread, and I bet all those games.
That's interesting. If you're that high of a percentage winning on betting that many games, that's impressive, sir. Because I feel like the more games I bet, the more I'm going to have a chance to lose.
The ones I'm thinking about eliminating are the plus 20, 21 point, like 3 touchdowns and over. Because I got 3 philosophies about this, Pete. Okay. One would be if it's an Ohio State Rutgers game and the spread's 42. Okay. You don't know who's going to be on the field in the fourth quarter of this game. You don't know who's actually going to be playing for either team. Even the bad team might pull its starters. You don't know the coach's philosophy of, let's just 3 runs and punt the last quarter. We're not putting down the throttle. We're going to coast home with a 17-point win, or we're going to keep passing. We're going to keep playing. We're going to keep scoring. And you also don't know how hard these teams are trying at that point, especially the better team. And in some instances, the games get completely out of hand because the better team, the Clemsons of the world, even though you would think that they would be backing off, well, their third stringers are in the game. Those guys want to score and win, and they want to look good. So they get in there, and they're better than the other team's first teamers. So they just continue to pour it on.
So do you bet on, have you bet on Clemson at all this year?
I haven't bet on anybody this year. I just picked the games.
Okay.
Now the Citadel didn't have a line, so I didn't pick that game. But I took Wake Forest in the 34. I took the 34, so that was a bit of a backdoor cover. There, I didn't feel real good about that one, but that's what it was.
Clemson's, aside from the fact that I'm a fan, I don't bet on them. They're just too hard for all the reasons you just said.
Yeah.
When they play a Notre Dame or somebody like that, it's a more evenly matched team. That might be an interesting bet. But when they're playing the Citadel and Wake Forest or whoever, those inflated lines scare me because they're going to play 95 players. Like we talked about. Definition 409 sent a super chat earlier for $2. Thank you, sir. He just wanted to know who Mark Rogers' favorite team was. And I think somebody else already answered that question. His favorite team is the Ohio State Buckeyes. However, he does not discriminate. I can tell you this for a fact. It's easy to say you don't discriminate when it's you talking about yourself. So I'm saying it for you. Anybody who watches Mark Rogers knows he's a very objective analyst.
So when I have to try to prove that, the couple things that I like, that I enjoy, is when people say, I've been watching you for 3 years and I have no idea who you root for.
Right.
The other thing is, I don't know what Ohio State did. This was about 3 months ago. I must have said something or went on some kind of rant, because I don't know how I would have been tearing down Ohio State in the middle of the offseason after going 13-1. But I must have been saying something where I got about a dozen people in the span of like 2 or 3 days telling me how much I hate the Buckeyes and why am I so hard on Ohio State. So I enjoy that. And also I let people know that in 2016, when Penn State won the Big Ten and Ohio State got selected to the playoff, I went on a rant for a week. I couldn't shut up saying that Penn State should have been in the playoff and Ohio State should have been left out.
Yes.
So I try to cut it. It's impossible. I will admit that. I don't believe that anybody can be completely unbiased. That means you don't care.
I admit when it comes to Clemson, I'm biased. I'm not hiding that. I am able to separate myself for the rest of the teams, though. Slim Shady Canes with a $10 donation. By the way, this is going to be a good time to mention this. I just want to let everybody know, Mark and I do split anything that you guys donate. So even if you don't like me and don't want to support me and you want to support Mark Rogers, go ahead and donate away because he will be getting 50% of that. But
or let's mention vice versa, because you probably just killed us with that one.
Okay. Or if you don't like Mark and you like me, you can donate. How about that? Pete and Mark don't hate Miami because Pete does claim, and he put claim in quotations there, to hate the turnover chain, but deep down in places he doesn't talk about on YouTube, he wishes Clemson had a turnover chain too. Everything about this, what he just said, is completely false and atrocious. Okay. I don't claim to hate the turnover chain. It's indifferent to me. I don't care about costume jewelry. And I think that if you look at the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the Clemsons of the world, the ones that are winning national championships on an annual basis, they don't need gimmicks like this.
Absolutely.
I think it's embarrassing for Miami. Now, look, I'm not in the Miami culture. I get it down there. That's their culture. They're flashy. It's sort of like the Miami of old back in the day when they had all these flashy players and Michael Irvin was there and everything. But to me, it's silly. And I do not wish that Clemson had a turnover chain. Did you see the rings too? What do they call that?
They got rings going.
Rings. Now. It says, what does it say? To the crib.
Oh yeah. I kept seeing that hashtag and kept seeing that all over the place. The crib.
Yeah, the crib. That's what it is.
Yeah,
the crib.
I'm right there with you. I could have said exactly what you just said in regards to, I always like to be rooting for the team or the program that's like, we're better than that. We don't need to do that.
Yeah, me too. But whatever, if they like it, more power to them.
Yeah, it's fun. It's cool. And I got to remember, I'm an old guy. I have to check myself all the time and say, Mark, you're an old guy. What a 20-year-old wants to do, what he wants to see, what he wants to buy, what he wants to put on, all that other stuff, and what they're interested in, completely different. What they think is cool, what they're into, I just can't relate to. But
I will admit, I'll give credit where credit's due as far as this chain goes. Miami did originate this. So there's been a ton of copycats across college football, which is even more embarrassing when you're copycatting.
Yes.
That. So at least it's original.
With the Florida State, what was theirs was like a backpack. Now that's like embarrassing.
Crazy ones. One team has a throne, like a king's throne, and they sit on the throne and put on a crown like a king. That's awful. I don't know who came up with that.
Now the question that I've had from my Miami guys that they haven't been able to answer, or maybe they don't want to answer, is once you put something like that in place, like this turnover chain, and I know, so I will give them the same credit you do. If you're going to do it, be the first and do it the best, and do the one that everybody thinks of and at least has some level of respect for. So that's good, but has there been, so this has been going on, this is a 4th season now, and as soon as this hit the scene, my first thought was, I'm always going the embarrassment route. When is this going to go wrong or off the rails? If you're losing 35-0 and you get a fumble recovery, are you guys dancing around and throwing on the chain and going crazy? Does it still?
And that has happened. Last year when Miami was bad, they were still running around celebrating that turnover chain when they were losing by 4 touchdowns. Definition 409 says the turnover chain was bought off a street vendor in New York City. The real reason they take it away quickly is it turns your neck green. Now, Slim Shady Canes told me, and I believe him, that thing cost like over $200,000 because of the diamonds in it. Can you believe that?
So you called it costume jewelry, which I love, but they were running down during the broadcast the other night what is in the chain, because it becomes more and more elaborate every year. And I was thinking, if this is real, this costs a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So who's paying for this?
Well, apparently, and I don't know, somebody could probably tell me something different. But what I know about it is that there's a famous jeweler down in Miami who makes jewelry for all the rappers and stuff down there. And he makes it and donates it to the university. So they're not actually paying for it according to them. Who knows if that's true or not? But that's a lot of money to spend on a piece of jewelry. And the one this year is especially ugly because it's shaped like the state of Florida. Did you see that?
Yes.
Shaped like the state of Florida, has a big U on it. And then when they're done wearing it, they treat it like it's the Torah, and they take it off and they clean it and wipe it off, and then they put it in some kind of special box and put with a lock on it.
Now, back to the expense portion of this, we know from Miami's past that there would be no possible way that there could be anything nefarious that's involved in regards to how this is financed.
Yeah, we'll leave that alone. Gator Zone says turnover trash can over the turnover backpack. Yeah, who is that? Oh, that was Butch Jones that had the trash can, wasn't it? You remember that?
No.
At Tennessee, they had a trash can. And when they turned the ball over, they would go and they would dunk the football into this Tennessee trash can, which was that's got to be the worst out of all of them. You're literally carrying around a trash can on the sidelines.
Yeah,
your team's logo on it.
So, you're proud of this.
Yeah,
sure.
He says Nevin Shapiro paid for the chain. Of course. Okay, we'll move on from the chain. I think we've given enough attention to the chain here, but thank you, Slim Shady, and everybody else who weighed in on that conversation. Okay, so enough of last week's games. I think we've pretty much hit everything that mattered. The SEC games coming up this week. First of all, we can run through these one by one, but is there any certain one? I'll tell you mine. Is there any certain one game that you're looking forward to seeing in the SEC this week, Mark?
So I'm going to catch up on this, but what comes to mind is I remember once the schedule came out, I immediately went to week 2, and that's tough to do in the SEC. Like I thought, why didn't they hit us with one game that's really going to make a difference? Just because it's the SEC and it's the best conference, and we need more good games. Like I'm finding one watchable game per window these last 2 weeks. Like there's 3:30 was UCF and Georgia Tech, and I was like full throttle. Like I'm into this game because there was nothing else to watch. So we were talking about this last week, where typically during the college football season, I'm going nuts because I'm trying to watch 8 games at the same time. It's been slim picking. So welcome back, SEC. But for the first week, I thought we'd get hit with something a little harder. But I'm intrigued by Florida going to Oxford to take on Lane Kiffin and the Rebels. Because if there's anybody that can scheme up an offense and make it work and knows mismatches and can do that, it's Lane Kiffin. So I'm a bit, and to try to maybe jump on the Gators, a superior foe in week 1, first game out of the gate at home, could be a little tricky.
It could be. Lane Kiffin and, of course, Mike Leach.
Yep.
In the West this year is definitely must-watch TV. And I don't know what to think about either one of those teams yet, because these are obviously two completely different coaching styles than what the universities had prior to them coming. So we have a lot to learn to see about what kind of talent they have to run the type of system they run. When's the last time Mississippi State threw the ball 50 times a game for a Mike Leach offense?
Never.
I've
been watching Mississippi State for a long time. I actually, as a side note, covered the SEC, meaning I know we cover the SEC, Pigskin and myself from afar, but in regards to like going to all the games, being on the sideline for 7 years, and they were one of my main stops, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Alabama. And so I've kind of kept an eye out because I got a lot of friends down there now, and they've always been pretty conservative. Whatever coach they've had, they've never had a high-powered passing offense. Can't think of a Mississippi State quarterback that's ever made the NFL outside of the one obvious one, Dak Prescott, of course. Yes. But he wasn't tossing it around 50 times by any stretch. So that's going to be, it's going to be a transformation of style of play. It's almost like a Georgia Tech, but not to that extreme that they're going to have to undergo there at Mississippi State. Like their best back, Kylan Hill, they're talking about him basically taking a hit as a runner, but becoming like a 75, 80 catch guy, like their tailback at Washington State.
So I see Big Ed as an LSU fan in here. Obviously, that's who Mississippi State is playing this week. But before I get into Big Ed's point here, I do want to address that. Thank you, Rattlehead, for the donation. He says they have hundreds of thousands worth of jewelry, but can't build or buy their own stadium. He's talking about Miami. Ding, 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 ding. That is correct, sir. I'll leave it there. Gator Zoned, thank you, sir. He says SEC East equals Dan Mullen's 6 DC and 6 DCs. We'll talk a little bit about that. But to Big Ed's point, Big Ed is a LSU fan. He's on here all the time, and I'm I'm on the fence about LSU. Well, I'm not really on the fence. My opinion's known. They lost so many players. Can you imagine? When was the last time that one team, maybe it was an Ohio State team at some point, lost this many players to the NFL in one season? Do you know, Mark? I don't know.
Ohio State had 14 drafted.
Yeah,
1 year.
I think if my Oklahoma or Ohio State's probably maybe an Alabama team somewhere, but it's just so hard to come. First of all, it's hard to compete for a national championship 2 years in a row, especially in the SEC, and to lose that many players and your star quarterback and one of your star coaches and Joe Brady. I think that LSU is obviously recruiting well. They obviously have great coaching. There's just a lot of unknowns and a lot of holes to fill this year. So I'm not hating on LSU. I'm not sleeping on LSU. I'm just saying it's going to be tough for them to compete this year. I'm looking more forward to 2021, 2022 for the Tigers.
Yeah, it's still a great program, still on great ground with Ed Ogeron, and but this isn't cycling as their year. They're still really good. You don't want to play them. They're still really talented, but it's young, inexperienced, unproven talent. And the point that I made to a lot of people that really railed on some of my predictions, especially in the SEC, was you're not going to see the records that you're accustomed to seeing in the SEC in terms of an overall record, because think about it. You don't have the 4 non-conference games, one of which is typically a tough game, and the other 3 are gimmies. You don't have those. You got 10 conference games. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be a lot of 6 and 4 teams that are like, wow, that team's really a top 15 team in the country, but they just went 6 and 4 because they had to play a 10-game SEC season, and they didn't have the 2 FCS. They didn't have a group of 5 to puff up their record to 9 and 3.
And LSU in particular has a brutal schedule every year just by default because of the division they're in. And of course, they play a worthy opponent in their cross-divisional thing with Florida every year. But this year, even more, because of the shortened season, it's even more brutal than a normal year, like you just mentioned there.
Pigskin, I've got my game. I forgot about this one. This is by far the game. If I could only watch one game this week, it's in the SEC. I'm
going to tell you, I haven't given you mine. It might be the same one. Go ahead.
Kentucky and Auburn.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good one too.
That's the game I want to see.
I'm worried about Kentucky, and for one reason only. Because they have been hyped up so much in the offseason. Normally when that happens to a team you can hype up Clemson and Alabama all you want.
Sure.
They live up to it every year. When you hype up some of these lower level teams or average team, I'm not going to say Kentucky's a lower level, but an average team, then a lot of times that goes sideways.
See, I thought I was ahead of the curve on that. Because do you know who I picked to win the SEC East?
Who? Kentucky? No way.
They're my SEC Eastern Division winner.
Ahead of Florida and Georgia.
They're winning a tiebreaker between the 3. I love Kentucky. And I did this. I didn't think anybody else was onto this.
I'm not on. So I'll give credit to Uncle Lou. He thinks that Kentucky's going to be very good this year. And I've heard other people too say it. I'm indifferent. I don't know enough about Kentucky to make that determination, but what I do know is that a lot of times when somebody like Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, is picking Kentucky to win the East, that is a high standard, sir, for a team that hasn't done that in a very long time. Have they ever done that?
No, they've never won the division.
Never done that. That's a high expectation to live up to.
Not even close. They haven't been close.
Auburn and Kentucky week 1, definitely an interesting game. You know what my most interesting game is, Mark? Can you guess what it is?
Well, I'm going to say we've already gone through 3, so
none of those 3.
Oh, it's one of those 3.
Oh, it's none of those 3. It's a different one.
Yeah, I think you like this Tennessee South Carolina game.
Yes. Ding 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 ding. That is correct, sir. Yes, Tennessee versus South Carolina. Not just because I'm a Clemson fan and I like to watch South Carolina lose. I really actually think that this is going to be an interesting game. It's so many unknowns. South Carolina has a brand new quarterback that they just named last week. What's this guy's name? Colin Hill, I think. The grad transfer from Colorado State. Ryan Helinski everybody in the country loves Ryan Helinski because of his story. And of course, certainly the South Carolina fans love him. But there must be a huge talent gap here. I don't know for them to name Colin Hill the starter this week. Of course, we know more about Tennessee than we know about South Carolina because they have a lot of talent coming back this year. They have a returning quarterback. But South Carolina has a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback here. We know a Will Muschamp defense is going to be legit. It is every year, no matter what the offense looks like. So this game is intriguing to me for one reason only. These are two teams that really are trying to cement themselves as contenders at some point in the East, especially Tennessee. And if this game went 14 points either way, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, in other words, if South Carolina beat Tennessee by 2 touchdowns, I wouldn't be surprised, and vice versa.
I think we're in a situation and have been in the SEC East where obviously Georgia's the gold standard, Florida's on the next tier, but there's a gap. And then you've got this fight between Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, South Carolina. And I know that it hasn't been completely even. South Carolina was down last year at 4-8, but they were a bowl team several seasons consecutively before that. Tennessee, it's a bit under the radar, has one of the best offensive lines in the SEC, or expected to have one of the best offensive lines in the SEC. You mentioned Garantano coming back. Their running back depth is tremendous. Can't think of the freshman. Was it Ty Chandler, who had a tremendous bowl game? And if you check out his stats, like the last 3 games of last season, he was like running for 150 to 200, and then was the bowl game MVP. And Tennessee, my 2 most intriguing teams this year, North Carolina and Tennessee.
North Carolina, Tennessee. I like it. Now, what do you think about this, Mark? While we're on the South Carolina subject, I know this is a COVID year and it's a weird year, and a lot of coaches are going to get a pass if they have a bad season. Is Will Muschamp on the hot seat?
He should be on the hot seat.
I agree. Well, I think he should have been on the hot seat since he took the job, but that's a different story. But in all seriousness, is it legitimate that he could get fired this year, no matter what happens?
I do think that most coaches are going to be given a pass. Like the issues, and let's forget any kind of off the field issues that could arise in any program. Let's keep it to football because we don't know what's going to pop up that derails a coach and causes a Bobby Petrino type situation, and it's regardless of what you've won, see ya. But just talking about the football, I think somebody's going to have to really come off the rails to get fired this year. I think there's going to be some consideration given to any coach, especially first-year head coaches. It should be. But Will Muschamp, he went from 3 wins to 6 to 9.
Yeah.
And now he's had 2 fall off years since then. They got blown out by Virginia 2 years ago in the bowl game to conclude a downturn from the 9-4 to 7-6, and now a 4-8 despite beating Georgia. And now with Tennessee jumping up in recruiting past them and Kentucky seemingly passing them 8-5 last year, man, they're in a bad spot. And I don't know why South Carolina never produces better on the field. I would think that they would be better. And I know Spurrier had the gold standard of 11 wins 3 consecutive years, and that's the best. South Carolina football history is pretty sparse. It's pretty bad.
Well, it's really bad. It's really, I mean, they have one ACC title in 1969. That's the only title they've ever won. You're talking about in the top 1% of bad in the history of football. Seriously.
I don't get it. I get it early on, like in the 50s when players were going north and that sort of thing. But ever since, the 70s and 80s, I don't get. They've got talent all over the place. They pack out their stadium, their fans. It's like It's not like some of these Big 12 and Pac-12 programs where you wonder if anybody cares. Like, people care.
If you look at Spurrier's years in particular, which was the best, 5, 6, 7 year run or whatever it was in the history of that program. What did you have? Stellar quarterback play. Connor Shaw was an absolute baller.
Yep.
He might have been, well, I don't know, during that time period. Maybe he wasn't technically the best quarterback in the SEC, but he was definitely one of them in the country too.
He had a season where he threw 24 touchdowns and 1 pick, and nobody seemed to notice.
He's highly undervalued unless you really pay attention to college football. I mean, he was just great. But they also had players like Jadeveon Clowney, who were just game wreckers. Running backs like Marcus Lattimore, and so you don't really have that guy in any Will Muschamp year in South Carolina. The quarterback play's been average at best. Jake Bentley was, he was up and down like a roller coaster, turnover machine. They haven't really had that lead back that can carry the offense and help the quarterback out. And they haven't really had that game wrecker on the defensive line, a pass rusher. It's certainly not to the level of Jadeveon Clowney. And those are the 3 things you need to compete in the SEC or really nationally at all. And they haven't had that. And I don't really see that they're going to have that this year either, unless there's some sort of player that I don't know about. I know Jordan Birch is there. He was a 5-star defensive lineman, so maybe he'll make some noise. I don't know. But the quarterback play, you can't win in today's college football without a talented quarterback, or at least one that can run the offense sufficiently enough to score some points.
And I think Hill's got the nod over Helinski because he can run around.
See, I don't know much about you. You pay attention more to some of the Group of 5 teams. I don't know much about Colorado State. I did look at his stat line, and his stat line looked good. But compared to I'm looking at the opponents that he's been playing against, and so it's hard for me to judge exactly how good that really is. He's a big kid though. What is he? 6'4", 230 pounds. So he's got the size.
Yeah.
What kind of arm does he have? Do you know?
Yeah, as soon as I heard the name, I thought, okay, Colorado State. I knew who he was. I've seen him play a little bit, but don't oversell me on the Group of 5.
Right.
I'm watching any Group of 5. It's a Friday night, maybe a Thursday night, but if there's a Pac-12 game or the type of games that we get on a Thursday or Friday, which usually overshadows those, then I'm catching whatever I can here and there. So,
and the fact that he is the preemptive favorite, maybe best option on that quarterback squad, is alarming in itself.
Yes.
So we'll see. I'm interested. That's the game of the week for me. Tennessee and South Carolina. I'll probably even be broadcasting that one live for all you people. I'll make that announcement later. Thank you, Slim Shady Canes, for the donation. This was a while ago. Hopefully he's still here. He says, Chain is on loan every year to Miami, has been accused, never convicted. And 3, I'll happily take a beer and a stadium seating at Hard Rock any day. Hard Rock is a nice stadium. That's one, but it's not a college stadium. It is nice to be able to buy a beer if that's your thing. But now a lot of colleges Ohio State's selling beers, aren't they? At the stadium?
So when people ask me questions like that, and I'm not talking about beer and I'm not talking about concessions in particular, I'm talking about like off the field, what's going on, game day, I have to let people know I'm not into that. I don't pay attention to that unless it just happens to connect with my ears and I remember it. Then I couldn't tell you.
I think they do. I'm pretty sure there's about a dozen different schools now that are allowing alcohol sales. Texas, Ohio State. I don't know what they all are, but I think Ohio State's one of them.
I'm like 600 miles away. I go to a game about every 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, a Definition 409 brings up a great point. Probably $10 for a beer anyway. So yeah, I'm with you. It's just another way for them to make money. Looks like who said that? Oh, Captain Trips, what's up, buddy? He says Vanderbilt is selling alcohol. See, there's a bunch of teams in the SEC and then several in the Big Ten.
And to your point about Hard Rock, yeah, it's a great stadium. It's beautiful. There were a lot of shots of it 2 weeks ago against UAB. It's beautiful, but it looks like a pro stadium. It is a pro stadium. That's not what I want my college stadiums to look like.
And I'm on that side of it with you. And I think it does hurt attendance. I have this argument with Miami fans all the time. Personally, I'm a traditionalist when it comes to college football. I prefer stadiums to be on campus. There's several out there that aren't, like Pitt, right? I mean, there's several teams that play in pro stadiums, and there's nothing wrong with that. I prefer it to be on campus just for the fan experience and the pageantry and everything. And I think, how far is that? That stadium's 30 miles or so away from Coral Gables. So you have to either bus or Uber or whatever it is that you do. I'm sure they have shuttles that run there, but it's still a hassle. If you want to tailgate, it makes it harder to do that. And that's really a lot of people love to tailgate in college football. If you go to Clemson, I'm sure at Ohio State's the same thing. You can tailgate, wrap your tent up or whatever you have there at your parking spot and walk 5 minutes and be in your seat. You can't do that at Miami. I think that hurts their attendance. Now, what they'll tell you is, oh, there's so much to do in Miami that no. Look, there's only 6, 7 home games a year in a 12-month period.
Exactly.
If you're that much of a Miami fan, you'd find a way to get to the game.
Yeah, if you're the Miami fan, even if you're just a decent college football fan and they're not your passion crazy about them, but they're your favorite team, and there's this excuse, yeah, if you're in LA, if you're in Miami, when USC's got half full LA Coliseums, well, there's so much to do in LA. I get that, but you're playing 6 games. It's not like you can't go to the club the other 6 nights of the week.
Right, or the other, how many months out of the year?
Yes.
So it's a tired excuse. Adam the Sports Guy says Miami attendance is hurt by stadium location. So that's what I say. I say that's number one reason. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Miami is more than most teams has a higher percentage of their fan base living several hours away from South Florida. I'll do you one better, Adam the Sports Guy. I'd say the majority of Miami fans don't even live in the state of Florida. How about that? They're very Notre Dame-ish in that way. They are spread out very thin across the country.
It seems to be that way. I got nothing to back that up, but just empirical evidence of talking to people. But it sounds like that think about it. They were, sorry, Miami fans, I don't think you're necessarily chic today. Maybe you are to some degree still, but during the 80s and especially the 90s, you were. And that's when a lot of people became college football fans that are now, 35, 40 years old. And they're all over the country. And they are still Miami fans. And they stayed with the Canes. Adam, by the way, thank you so much for the comment that you left on my channel or somewhere where you found me today. And I appreciate that.
Yes, thanks, Adam. And he agrees with me. He makes a funny comment here. Says, personally, I think Miami only has 13 to 14 fans, and they're all on YouTube.
They all have YouTube channels.
YouTube channels. That's more important. Yes. I really like Miami fans. They're fun.
They are fun. I've got to, credit some of my, do we say success? I think that might be a little bit of a stretch to Miami fans.
Me too. And I won't use the word success, but whatever it is,
whatever I'm doing,
they are active and very supportive of college football on the internet. No doubt about it. All right. So let's take a look here at, this might be the most interesting trash game of the week. Speaking of Miami and Florida State. This is a heated rivalry. They play every single year. I'm looking forward to the next 5 days on the internet, watching these guys rip each other's throats out on the internet. I looked at the line on this earlier. Or yesterday when the lines came out, it was 9.5. Okay. Miami's favorite. I think it's up to 10.5 now. And I would venture to say that's probably going to keep going up. But what do you think about this? I'm not going to lie. I already took Miami at 9.5 yesterday when it came out. I jumped all over that.
So I pretty much, I'm not a big, we talk betting on here and picking games and everything, but I don't want to oversell myself as some kind of odds maker because I just do I just pick the games for fun. I don't put a whole lot of research into it, anything like that. But people were asking me about the game after the Miami Louisville game. And I instantly said, I think that line's going to be about 10. So I think we tend to overcompensate or think too much and make too much out of week 1 performances. And we'll call the Miami Louisville game a week 1 or a first game against a big opponent. The Miami win was impressive. It was on the road, all those things. But what is Miami going to do every week? Florida State looked awful. I don't know. I think there might be a little. I would never say I'm not going to pick Florida State to win. I don't think they're as good a team. I think they're in disarray. Their coach has COVID.
that can help. Yeah, I think that makes a big deal in this game.
Yeah, you would think so. It's a new coaching staff. It's not like he's got some well-established staff that's been there for 6 years with him. So they just kind of pick up where
they
already know what they're doing.
Is the mastermind behind this offense.
So
the offense is trying to do. I mean, I haven't done anything, but he's the mastermind behind what they're trying to do. And I think him not being there, and not only not being there for the game, he's not around the team all week.
Yeah.
Which really hurts them. So I think this line's too low. I really think, of course, this is a rivalry game. So sometimes these rivalry games can get weird. In-state rivals there that play every year. So I don't know, man. I just feel like this game's going to be over at halftime. Maybe I'm overreacting.
Again, that's kind of what I'm selling us on, the overreaction, but that's what it looks like right now. But it's like week 2 lines in the NFL. Everybody seems to go overboard about what happened in week 1, and somebody looked really bad, so they're going to be bad. And I think Florida State's going to put up a fight, but when it's only 10's a significant line, but Miami could wipe that out in 5 minutes. This could be a decent game. This could be a really good game. It could be 23-20 in the fourth quarter, and then you get a 37-20 final because Miami tacked on 2 touchdowns because they just Florida State's going to struggle to score. If they showed us anything against Georgia Tech, and this defense is 10 times better than Georgia Tech's.
I think Louisville and Florida State are comparable in a lot of ways. So that's exactly what we saw against Louisville with Miami is they let Louisville hang around for a lot of the game, and then they just blew the doors off of them at the end. And that's something that could very easily happen here. Gator Zone with the donation says, Pete, check out the Big 3 roll-up pod for good Miami versus Florida State talk. I will do that, and thank you, sir. Hold on a second. Let me scroll back up here. Slim Shady Canes, thank you, sir. He says, get Daniel Boone off that damn horse. The white Tonto. Uncle Lou calls him the white Tonto. I'm not going to even touch that one, Mark. You got anything to say about that?
I've got nothing on that.
Okay.
I've got a Florida State show every Tuesday night, so I got to hear it from those folks going back and forth, defending versus criticizing and attacking.
Yeah.
I stay out of it.
The only thing I'll say about that is on the Lunch Money show, we were talking about the white Tonto. We were also talking about the people that drive the covered wagon for Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And so Uncle Lou's question was, what would be easier for the person that drives that covered wagon to ride that horse or for the white Tonto to drive that covered wagon? I said, I think anybody can drive that covered wagon based on the fact that the people that actually do drive it don't seem to know how to drive it based on what happened last year.
Oh, did we have an issue last year?
You don't remember the Oklahoma wagon that everyone got thrown off of the wagon and they crashed it?
Well, there's a famous incident, but going all the way back to the 1985 Orange Bowl, in which it came off the rails and they steered it too sharply and they all fell off and they
last year.
Last year,
yeah, last season. They
don't remember that.
They threw one of the women, poor woman on there. She got thrown about 20 yards off of that thing. Luckily, no one was seriously injured. But anyway.
I don't remember that.
Oh yeah, just when you get off of here or at some point, just look it up on YouTube. It's a crazy scene there. Definition 409 says Miami used interim coaches anyway. It was used to interim coaches anyway. Yes, this is true. Thank you, sir. I'm not insulting the Sooner Schooner Coulter, but they make it easy on you when they start crashing that thing. All right, let's see some of the other games. We got, you have another 5 minutes or so, Mark?
Heck yeah.
All right. We talked about Mississippi State, LSU. We talked a little bit about Florida and Ole Miss, Kentucky and Auburn. We talked about Tennessee, South Carolina, Florida. Okay. Notre Dame and Wake. I don't even know. This really isn't that interesting of a game.
You know what I'm going to throw out?
What?
How good is Virginia Tech? A lot of people like Virginia Tech, and they're only playing NC State, but NC State at least has a pulse. They pulled out a win against Wake, and I don't know that this is going to tell us a whole lot about Virginia Tech, but they had the game canceled against Virginia, so they're getting a late start to the season for the ACC, but they're playing on Saturday night.
Yes, and where's that game, in Blacksburg?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So they should be fine.
So based on what I saw, by the way, NC State surprised me a little bit in that game. But that, of course, that was the first game of the season, so I didn't really have anything to base off my opinion off of anyway. But that was a high-scoring game. We're talking about 87 points were scored in that game, 45-42. That was actually one of the more interesting, exciting games of the weekend, just from an on-the-field standpoint. But we don't know what Virginia Tech's going to look like. That's the issue. They're their only team, right, in the ACC that hasn't played yet.
Exactly. And they are part of my three-way tie for second place in the ACC.
Clemson has to go there late in the season. So
yeah,
last game. I don't really know their quarterback situation there has been shaky at best. Do you even know who their starting quarterback is? I'm going to go ahead and admit that.
Yeah, Hendon Hooker.
Okay.
Who played well for the most part last year.
Yeah. Bud Foster's gone.
Justin Fuente took over that program. They went 10-4, 9-4, and went to an ACC championship game. They started off the next year like 3 or 4-0, and he was off to a great start. Looked like it was a great transition from Memphis there, and then they derailed. They went 6-7. They looked really bad 2 years ago. They started off last year badly. They had a horrible loss in there, I think, to Duke, like 45-10 on a Thursday night. And they got off to and he was reeling at that point, and they somehow pulled it together. Now, if you look at the recruiting class that Virginia Tech brought in last year, it was like 60th in the country. Like, it was atrocious.
You can't compete doing that.
No.
You know, I know Virginia Tech does not have a history of firing coaches. I mean, well, we've seen one guy that was there for 30 years before Fuente, right?
Yeah, sure.
But at some point, you've got to do better than what, especially on the recruiting trail. And we all know it all starts with that. You can't win games without the players. Now that Bud Foster's gone, the defense is an unknown. And obviously Bud Foster was probably a huge recruiting tool for defensive players at Virginia Tech because of his prowess and his name. He's gone. So we'll see. Maybe, I don't know, maybe, who knows? Maybe Bud Foster leaving will be a positive. Sometimes it's good to get new blood in there. Somebody to change things up. Maybe a younger mindset, something. I don't know. But that is an interesting game, and mainly because we haven't seen Virginia Tech play. And as a Clemson fan, I can tell you, anybody that's on Clemson's schedule, especially a road game outside of Death Valley, is something that a team I want to keep my eye on.
Now, Kansas State looked awful in its first game against Arkansas State and was one of the Big 12 victims, one of many. But they traditionally give Oklahoma fits, and they beat Oklahoma last year.
They did.
Louisville Pitt. There's my game right there, and it hurts me every time I see SEC Network, ACC Network. That means I can't watch the game.
You don't have either one of those?
Neither one of them. So Louisville Pitt, because of what Louisville showed us or failed to show us the other night, and I think that the Miami fans have every reason to be excited. They beat a decent opponent, but again, decent opponent. Pitt is just, we talked about their defense.
Right.
And some of those playmakers made big plays against Syracuse. They didn't look good offensively, but Paris Ford is one of the best defensive backs in the country. They just played really well defensively against Syracuse, just 7 sacks. And they're playing Louisville at home. I think this is a really good matchup.
And it is a good matchup. And the story here is Pittsburgh's defensive line against that terrible Louisville offensive line. I already feel sorry for Malik Cunningham, and the game's still 5 days away. And I feel sorry for the running back there. This could get ugly. I'd say Pitt's defensive line is at least as good as Miami's. And we saw how that turned out.
Yes. They're in that range.
Mm-hmm.
Miami fans are going to jump on us for that, but they're in that same range.
I don't hate Miami. And you know, actually, I'm hoping kind of that Miami goes into the Clemson game undefeated, just for the, just for the factor that I want that to be a top 10 matchup or whatever, top 15, whatever they end up being ranked by that time. That will help Clemson's strength of schedule out a little bit. And
I am really hurt at noon here. Pigskin with Kentucky Auburn. If I could watch one game, and I said this earlier, one game this week, I'm watching Kentucky and Auburn. I can't see it. And then at the same time, this is an under the radar game for me that I think is really good is Louisville Pitt. They're playing at the same time, ACC, SEC, and I'm going to be. I'm not watching Notre Dame and Wake. That's not going to be on my first screen.
No.
That's my third game.
That's the one you just continue to update your score on your phone.
You know, if Wake's giving them a game in the fourth quarter, obviously I'm flipping over. But from kickoff, I'm not expecting that to be a game. I'm going Ole Miss and Florida just to see different teams play. And then Oklahoma, Kansas State's going to be my second game. But the two games I really want to see, I can't see at noon.
And then the primetime game is actually Tennessee and South Carolina. I don't know if they've announced where a game day is going to be, but usually that's the 7:30 game. So they may actually be headed to Columbia for this week. I don't know. Does anybody in the chat know? But nonetheless, that'll be the primetime game. And I'm with you. I'm the most looking forward to Kentucky and Auburn. Florida State, Miami, and Tennessee, South Carolina. That's my top three as far as interest factor goes.
I'm going to throw out one other big game in the Big 12 in terms of the winner of this game could be a dark horse. And I know Iowa State was awful in their opener, but they've done this before. They've lost to an FCS or looked awful against a group of five, and then they made a little noise in the Big 12 under Matt Campbell. But Iowa State at TCU, it's a decent game.
Mark. Everybody in the chat is saying game day is in Miami.
So I was going to throw that out, but I wasn't positive.
That surprises me. I realize this is a rivalry, but is this really the best game of the week? I mean,
no, it's not even close to the best game of the week.
Let's not forget that we've already had, because of COVID, we've already had 2 consecutive weeks in an ACC stadium or ACC schools. So a third week in a row with the SEC starting up this week. I would have thought for sure Auburn, Kentucky would be a better candidate for that. Heck, a lot of other ones. Tennessee, South Carolina.
Well, what screwed me was CBS made the choice for LSU, Mississippi State. They get the number 1 choice, and they picked that game because LSU is the defending national champion, I assume. But they could be looking at a 28-7 game at halftime. I don't think it's going to be a really good game. They had other better candidates, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, Auburn, to go with, but they didn't. So in terms of a game that game day destination, it's not a slam dunk, but again, I'm going back to Kentucky, Auburn being what I think is going to be the best game of the day.
Captain Tripp says, Miami or South Carolina, not a tough decision. Well, I get that. I get that. I just thought they would have done an SEC team and changed it up a little bit this week. That is going to, I'm running out of time here, Mark. That's going to conclude the show for today. First of all, this has been a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys will continue to put this show on your calendar every single Monday at 12 o'clock noon with myself and the voice of college football, Mark Rogers TV. Any last words, Mark? Tell us that we have a lot more people in here than we had at the beginning of the show. So let everybody know, other than here on Mondays, where they can find you. Yeah.
So if you go to any video on my channel and go down to the description section, you're going to see a link in there that I can jump back in here while Pete's signing off. And I'll leave the link back in the description section or in the live chat here of where you can find our little community over on Patreon, where we've got live streams almost every day. My top 25 that actually makes sense that I just released a couple after the games on Saturday. And then, of course, we've got my predictions.
All right. Everybody go check out Mark on Patreon. Support our guy. He needs it right now. And of course, he's it's not charity. He's providing you with great content. So go check him out. All right. So that'll thank you everybody who stopped in today at this crazy time of day during your lunch hour or wherever you happen to be. Thank you to all the people that donated. Me and Mark both really appreciate that. You have no idea how much that helps. We will see you guys next week at 12 o'clock for college football coast to coast. See you later, bud.